Through the scope of my M40A5 sniper rifle, the world was silent, magnified, and deadly. 300 yards away, Sheriff Grant stood over a fresh grave, the mud slick with rain. But he wasn't grieving. He was holding a chrome-plated revolver to the temple of a crying, pregnant woman kneeling in the dirt. My finger hovered over the trigger. One twitch, Sheriff, I whispered into the wind. Just give me one reason. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The rain was coming down in sheets, freezing and relentless, but I didn't feel the cold. I hadn't felt much of anything since the phone call 3 days ago. All I felt now was the rhythmic thud of my own heartbeat against the stock of the rifle and the cold calculation of windage and elevation. I was prone in the tall grass on a ridge overlooking the Whispering Pines Cemetery. It was a good high ground, obscured by ancient oak trees, giving me a perfect view of the funeral that had ended an hour ago. The mourners had left. The priest had packed up his Bible and driven away in his sedan. Only 2 people remained. One was Eliza. She was kneeling in the mud, her black dress soaked through, clinging to her small frame. Her hands were wrapped protectively around her swollen belly, shielding her unborn child from the storm. She looked so fragile from this distance, shaking as she sobbed over the mound of earth that covered my brother, Ian. The other person was Sheriff Grant. He wasn't comforting her. He was looming over her like a vulture. I adjusted the focus on my scope. The crosshairs settled perfectly on the bridge of his nose. Through the high-powered lens, I saw the veins bulging in his neck. I saw the spittle flying from his mouth as he screamed at her. And then, I saw him draw his weapon. My breath caught in my throat, a sharp hitch that I immediately suppressed. Discipline, Mason. Discipline. I had killed men in deserts and jungles for my country. I had taken shots that technically shouldn't have been possible. But this? Watching a corrupt lawman threaten my brother's widow on top of my brother's grave? This was a different kind of war. Where is it, Eliza? Grant's voice didn't carry over the wind, but I was reading his lips. I had spent years learning to read the silence. Ian stole something from me. A drive. I know he gave it to you. Eliza shook her head frantically, looking up at him with wide, terrified eyes. She tried to stand, but the mud made it slick, and she slipped back down. Grant didn't offer a hand. Instead, he took a step closer, the barrel of his revolver inches from her forehead. I swear I don't know, she cried. I could see the terror etched into her face. He didn't give me anything. He just said he loved me. Liar, Grant roared. He grabbed her by the arm, hauling her up roughly. My finger tightened on the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure. That was all it would take to turn Sheriff Grant's head into a pink mist. The solution was so simple. End him. Save her. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I dropped him now, the secrets died with him. Ian didn't just die in a car accident. My brother was a safe driver. He was careful. He was paranoid. The police report said he lost control on Blackwood Curve, but Ian could drive that road blindfolded. No, someone ran him off the road. Someone wanted him silenced. And if Grant was this desperate to find a drive, then that drive contained the proof of why my brother was rotting in the ground 6 feet below them. I needed that drive. And to find it, I needed to know what Grant knew. Please, Eliza begged, wincing as his grip on her arm tightened. You're hurting me. Please, think of the baby. Ian didn't think about his family when he stole my leverage, Grant spat. He shoved her back. She stumbled, catching herself on the tombstone, Ian's tombstone. The irony made my blood boil. I watched Grant look around, his eyes scanning the tree line. He was nervous. He knew he was crossing a line, even for him. But he didn't see me. No one ever saw me until it was too late. I was wearing a ghillie suit that blended perfectly with the wet autumn foliage. To him, I was just another shadow in the woods. You have 24 hours, Grant hissed, leaning down so his face was inches from hers. He tapped the barrel of the gun against her cheek. Check the house. Check his workshop. If you don't have that drive in my hand by tomorrow night, you and that bastard in your belly will join Ian. The rage that surged through me was white-hot, blinding. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run down that hill and tear him apart with my bare hands. I promised Ian. Years ago, before I deployed for the third time, Ian had grabbed my shoulder. If anything happens to me, Mason, watch over them. Eliza, the kid, promise me. Nothing's gonna happen to you, little brother. I had laughed. You're an accountant. The most dangerous thing you face is a paper cut. I was wrong. I was so damn wrong. Grant holstered his weapon, adjusted his belt, and walked back to his cruiser parked on the gravel path. He didn't look back at the woman he had just threatened to execute. I kept the crosshairs on the back of his head until he got into the car. I memorized the license plate. I memorized his face. I memorized the way he walked, arrogant, untouchable. As the cruiser drove away, splashing mud onto the pristine headstones, Eliza collapsed against Ian's grave. She curled into a ball, clutching the dirt, her body racking with sobs that I couldn't hear but could feel in my own chest. I slowly exhaled, my breath forming a cloud in the freezing air. I lowered the rifle. I couldn't go to her. Not yet. If Grant was watching the house, and I knew he was, me showing up would only paint a target on her back. She had to believe she was alone. That was the only way she would lead me to the drive. I had to be a ghost. I had to be the monster in the dark that hunted the other monsters. I pulled back from the ridge, crawling backwards until I was deep enough in the woods to stand. I slung the rifle over my shoulder and looked back one last time at the lonely figure in the graveyard. I'm here, Eliza, I whispered to the trees, and I'm going to rain hell on anyone who touches you. But as I turned to head toward my truck hidden 2 miles away, my earpiece crackled. I had tapped into the local police frequency an hour ago. Sheriff to Deputy Ryder. Grant's voice came through, distorted but clear. Go ahead, Sheriff, came the reply. She doesn't know where it is. Or she's playing dumb. Go to the farmhouse tonight. Toss the place. Make it look like a break-in. Scaring her isn't enough. We need to break her. I stopped dead in my tracks. Copy that, Sheriff. What if she's there? There was a pause on the radio. A silence that chilled me more than the rain. Accidents happen, Ryder. Especially to grieving widows living alone. I checked my watch. It was 4 p.m. Darkness would fall in an hour. I had to beat the deputy to the farmhouse. I had to set up a perimeter. I started to run, my boots pounding against the wet earth. The war wasn't overseas anymore. It was right here, in my hometown. And tonight, the first shot would be fired. I reached my truck, a battered, matte black Chevy Silverado I'd bought specifically because it was invisible at night, and tore out of the hidden logging road. The tires spun in the mud before gripping the gravel, launching the heavy vehicle forward. The farmhouse was 5 miles away. I knew the layout by heart. Ian had sent me photos when he bought it 3 years ago. It's a fixer-upper, Mason, he'd said, his voice bursting with pride. But it's got good bones. Plenty of room for kids to run around someday. Now, those good bones were about to become a battleground. I didn't take the main road. If Grant had patrols out, they'd spot a strange truck instantly. Instead, I cut through the old deer trails, risking the suspension on hidden roots and rocks. I drove with the headlights off, using my night vision goggles to navigate the gloom. It was risky, stupid driving, but I didn't have time for caution. Ryder was on his way. I parked the truck deep in the thicket of pines that bordered the north side of the property, nearly a half-mile from the house. I grabbed my gear bag, suppressors, tripwires, thermal optics, and a suppressed Glock 19. I moved fast, silent, blending into the deepening twilight. When the farmhouse came into view, it looked deceptively peaceful. A single yellow light burned in the kitchen window. I could see Eliza's silhouette moving inside. She was pacing, back and forth, hand on her forehead, then on her stomach. She was terrified. I wanted to knock on that door. I wanted to tell her, I'm here. Ian's brother is here. But I stopped myself at the edge of the clearing. If I walked in there now, she'd panic. She'd never met me. Ian and I had been estranged for 5 years, a stupid fight about me re-enlisting instead of coming home to help with Dad's business before he died. She only knew me as the soldier brother who never called. If I showed up looking like this, camouflage, weapons, smelling of wet earth and gun oil, she wouldn't see a savior. She'd see another threat. And worse, if Ryder showed up and saw me, the element of surprise was gone. Grant would call in the state troopers, paint me as a crazed veteran, and siege the house. I needed to be invisible. I moved to the barn first. It had a clear line of sight to the back porch and the driveway. I climbed the ladder to the loft, disturbing a few nesting pigeons that fluttered nervously but stayed put. I settled into the hay, setting up my spotting scope and checking the sight lines. From my vantage point, I had a perfect view of the kitchen. Eliza had stopped pacing. She was sitting at the small wooden table, clutching a mug of tea with both hands. She was staring at a photo on the wall, her and Ian on their wedding day. Suddenly, she stood up and moved to the drawer near the sink. She pulled out a large kitchen knife. My chest tightened. She wasn't just scared. She was preparing to fight. Good girl. Ian had taught her well. 20 minutes passed. The wind howled against the barn's tin roof, masking the sound of tires crunching on gravel until it was almost too late. A cruiser rolled up the long driveway, lights off. Just like I expected. It wasn't Grant. It was Deputy Ryder. I recognized him from the funeral, a young, eager kid with a weak chin and eyes that shifted too much. He parked the car just out of sight of the windows, near the old tractor shed. I brought my rifle up, resting the barrel on the edge of the loft window. I adjusted for the wind. Ryder stepped out of the car. He wasn't wearing his uniform hat. He was pulling on black leather gloves. He didn't walk to the front door like a visitor. He crept toward the back porch, crouching low, moving with a purpose that made my skin crawl. He had a crowbar in one hand and his service pistol in the other. This wasn't a wellness check. This was a hit. I watched him test the back door. Locked. He moved to the kitchen window, the one right above the sink where Eliza had been standing moments ago. He peered inside. Then, he wedged the crowbar into the frame. I took a breath. If I shot him, it was murder of a police officer. Investigation. Prison. Game over. I had to scare him off. I had to make him believe this house was haunted by something far worse than a ghost. I aimed not at him, but at the transformer box on the utility pole about 10 feet behind him. It was a small target, sparking in the rain. Thwip. The suppressed shot was barely a whisper, lost in the wind. The bullet struck the transformer with a metallic clang. A shower of blue sparks exploded into the night air with a loud pop, followed by a sizzling hiss. The floodlight on the back porch flickered and died, plunging the backyard into total darkness. Ryder jumped about 3 feet in the air, spinning around, his gun raised. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice cracking. I racked the bolt. This time, I aimed for the side mirror of his cruiser, 50 yards away. Thwip. Glass shattered. The mirror exploded inward. Ryder dropped to the ground, scrambling for cover behind the woodpile. He was breathing hard. I could see his thermal signature pulsing with panic. He had no idea where the shots were coming from. To him, the darkness had just bitten back. Inside the house, Eliza screamed. The lights inside had flickered but stayed on. She ran to the window, the knife raised, trying to see out into the yard. "Police!" Ryder yelled, trying to regain control, but his voice was shaking. "Mrs. Vance, open the door." "Go away." Eliza screamed back, her voice muffled by the glass, but clear enough. "I have a gun. I'll shoot." She didn't have a gun, but Ryder didn't know that. And Ryder, realizing he was taking fire from an unknown position in the dark, wasn't eager to test his luck. He was a bully, not a soldier. Bullies crumble when the victim fights back. He waited for another shot. I didn't give him one. I let the silence stretch out, heavy and terrifying. "This isn't over." Ryder yelled at the house, though he was looking at the woods. He scrambled backward toward his cruiser, keeping low, practically crawling until he could yank the door open. He peeled out of the driveway in reverse, tires spraying mud. not even bothering to turn his headlights on until he was on the main road. I watched his taillights disappear. I didn't relax. I kept my scope trained on the driveway for another hour. My muscles ached from the cold, but I didn't move. Inside, Eliza was sitting on the floor now, her back against the cabinets, the knife still in her hand. She was crying again. She pulled her phone out. I quickly pulled out my own burner phone, the one I had prepped with a voice changer. I needed to guide her, but I couldn't let her know who I was. Not yet. I dialed her landline number, watching through the scope as she jumped when the phone on the wall rang. She stared at it, terrified. She let it ring 4 times before reaching up with a trembling hand to answer. Hello. Check the floorboards, Eliza, I said, my voice digitized and deep, stripped of any human warmth. Who is this? She gasped, standing up, looking around the room wildly. Are you the one shooting? Did you send him? I'm the one who sent him running, I said. And he'll be back. You don't have 24 hours anymore. You have maybe 2. Ian hid it in the nursery. Think. Where would he hide the future? There was a long silence. I saw her eyes widen. She dropped the phone, leaving it dangling by its cord, and ran out of the kitchen toward the hallway. I lowered the binoculars. She remembered. Now came the hard part. Once she found that drive, she was a moving target, and I had to get her out of there before Grant returned with an army. I climbed down from the loft, my boots hitting the soft earth. It was time to move closer. I covered the half-mile to the farmhouse in under 6 minutes, moving through the tree line like a phantom. The adrenaline from the shot was gone, replaced by the cold, hard focus of the mission. Ryder was gone, but he had already done the damage. He had terrified a pregnant woman alone in a house full of memories. I couldn't risk entering the house yet. If Eliza was armed and panicked, she might shoot at the first shadow she saw. I had to watch. I had to wait. I circled to the south side of the property, where the old oak tree stood close to the master bedroom window. I climbed the thick branches, the bark rough against my tactical gloves, until I had a clear view into the hallway and the living room. Inside, the house was dark except for the spill of light from the kitchen. Eliza wasn't in the hallway anymore. I shifted my thermal scope, scanning the walls. There. She was in the nursery. The room was half finished. A crib was set up in the corner, still wrapped in plastic. Paint cans were stacked by the door. Eliza was on her hands and knees, frantically pulling up the rug in the center of the room. She was sobbing, her movements jerky and desperate. Ian hid it in the nursery. Think. My words had worked. She remembered something. I watched as she used a small pry bar, probably one of Ian's tools, to wedge up a loose floorboard near the window. It came up with a screech of nails that I could hear even through the glass. She reached into the dark hole beneath the floor. When she pulled her hand back, she was holding a small, metal lockbox. She sat back on her heels, staring at it. Her chest was heaving. She fumbled with the latch, her fingers shaking so hard she dropped it twice. Finally, it clicked open. She pulled out a thick envelope and a silver flash drive. My heart hammered against my ribs. Bingo. That drive was the leverage. That was the reason my brother was dead. But Eliza didn't just put it in her pocket. She opened the envelope. She pulled out a letter. I zoomed in with my scope, trying to read the handwriting, but the angle was wrong. All I could see was her reaction. She started reading. Then, she stopped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She dropped the letter as if it had burned her skin. She scrambled backward, away from the box, shaking her head violently. What did you tell her, Ian? Suddenly, she grabbed the letter again, her eyes scanning the bottom of the page. She screamed, a sound of pure betrayal that cut through the night silence. It wasn't grief. It was horror. She stood up, stumbling, clutching the flash drive so hard her knuckles were white. She ran to the window, the very window I was watching from. She looked out into the darkness, her eyes wild. Why? She screamed at the empty yard. Why did you trust him? She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to Ian. And then I saw headlights. Not one car. 3. They were coming fast down the main road. No sirens, just speed. I checked my watch. 2 a.m. Grant hadn't waited until morning. He knew Ryder failed. He was bringing the heavy hitters. I keyed my radio, checking the police frequency. Silence. They were operating off the grid. This wasn't an arrest. It was a cleanup operation. I dropped from the tree, landing in a crouch. I had maybe 90 seconds before they breached the front gate. Eliza was inside with the evidence, completely exposed. I sprinted toward the back porch. The stealth approach was over. I needed to get her out now. I reached the back door just as the first cruiser skidded to a halt at the front of the house. Car doors slammed. I heard the distinct rack of a shotgun slide. Sheriff's Department. Grant's voice boomed through a megaphone, shattering the stillness. Eliza Vance, come out with your hands up. We know you have it. I didn't hesitate. I kicked the back door in. The wood splintered with a loud crash. Eliza spun around in the hallway, raising the kitchen knife, screaming in terror. Don't, I shouted, my voice rough but human this time. I stepped into the light, hands raised but clearly armed. I'm not with them. I'm Ian's brother. She froze. The knife wavered. She looked at my face, at the eyes that mirrored her husband's. Mason, she whispered, her voice trembling. We have to go, I said, moving toward her. Right now? Or we both die in this house. He killed him, she stammered, holding up the drive. Ian said, in the letter. I know, I said, grabbing her arm gently but firmly. And he's going to kill us if we don't move. Glass shattered in the living room. A canister of tear gas hissed across the floor. Smoke started to fill the air. Out the back, I commanded, pulling her. Move. We ran into the kitchen just as the front door exploded inward. Heavy boots thundered on the hardwood. Clear the ground floor. Grant yelled. Find them. We burst out the back door into the cold night air. I pushed her toward the cornfield. Run. Into the stalks. Don't stop. I turned back toward the house, raising my rifle. I wasn't running yet. I needed to buy her time. A deputy stepped onto the back porch, his weapon raised. I squeezed the trigger. The suppressor coughed, a sharp thwip that was swallowed by the wind. The deputy on the porch spun around, his leg buckling as the round took out his knee. He screamed, collapsing onto the wood, his shotgun clattering away. I didn't aim to kill, not yet. A wounded man takes two others out of the fight to help him. That was the math of war. Officer down, someone yelled from inside. Back door? Taking fire. I turned and sprinted into the cornfield. The stalks were high, dry, and rustling loudly in the wind. Perfect cover for noise, terrible for visibility. I caught up to Eliza about 50 yards in. She was stumbling, gasping for air, one hand clutching her stomach, the other gripping the flash drive like a lifeline. Keep moving, I urged, grabbing her elbow to steady her. Don't look back. My water, she gasped, her face pale in the moonlight. Mason, I think, the stress. Not now, Eliza, I said, my voice low and urgent. You hold that baby in. You hear me? We stop, we die. Behind us, the farmhouse was lit up like a Christmas tree. Spotlights swept the field. I could hear Grant's voice, furious and distorted by distance. Fan out. They're in the corn. Burn it if you have to. Burn it. He was insane. Get low, I ordered. We dropped to our knees, crawling through the mud between the rows. A bullet zipped through the stalks above our heads, snapping the dry corn like twigs. Then another. They were firing blindly, spraying and praying. They're shooting at us. Eliza sobbed, freezing in the dirt. They're shooting at noise, I corrected, pulling her forward. So we stopped making it. I scanned the field. The extraction point was the old irrigation ditch on the north side. It led to the creek, which led to the woods where my truck was hidden. It was a mile away. In her condition, it might as well be a marathon. Mason, she whispered, grabbing my tactical vest. The letter, Ian said. She was hyperventilating. He said Dad knew. He said Dad paid them. I stopped crawling. I looked at her, wiping mud from her cheek. Your father? Victor, she choked out. Ian said Victor was using the trucking company to move something. Drugs? Money? I don't know. Grant found out. Grant blackmailed them. And then they decided Ian was a liability. The rage flared in my chest again, hotter this time. Victor, her own father, the man who sat in the front row at the funeral, looking solemn in his expensive suit. He had signed his son-in-law's death warrant and left his daughter to the wolves. We'll deal with him, I promised Darky. But first, we survive. Suddenly, a roar erupted to our left. An engine. I looked up. A pickup truck, one of the deputies, was tearing through the cornfield, smashing down the stalks, headlights cutting bright swaths through the darkness. They were driving through the field to flush us out. Move, I yelled, abandoning stealth. I hauled Eliza up. Run. We scrambled to our feet and bolted. The truck was gaining, the engine revving high. I could hear the tires churning the mud. There, a voice shouted from the truck bed. I see them. A spotlight hit us, blindingly bright. I spun around, raising my rifle. I didn't have a clear shot at the driver through the glare. I aimed for the light. Crack. The spotlight shattered. Darkness rushed back in. Flashbang. I yelled to Eliza. Close your eyes. I pulled the pin on one of the two flashbangs I carried and hurled it over my shoulder toward the truck. Bang. The explosion was deafening, a concussive wave that rattled my teeth. The truck swerved violently to the right, crashing into a hidden irrigation pivot with the sound of tearing metal. The engine stalled. Men were shouting, disoriented and blinded. Go, go, go. I pushed Eliza toward the ditch. We slid down the muddy embankment, splashing into the freezing water. It was waist-deep. Eliza cried out from the cold, her teeth chattering instantly. It's okay, I lied. It masks our scent. The dogs won't track us. We waded through the muck for what felt like hours. Every step was a struggle. Eliza was failing. Her weight was leaning heavier on me with every yard. Finally, the ditch widened into the creek bed. The woods were just ahead. Almost there. I grunted, my own legs burning. We scrambled up the bank and into the tree line. My truck was right where I left it, covered in a camouflage net. I opened the passenger door and lifted Eliza inside. She was shivering uncontrollably, her lips blue. I grabbed the emergency blanket from the back and wrapped it around her. Heat, I muttered, climbing into the driver's seat. Need heat. I started the engine. The V8 rumbled to life, a beautiful sound. I didn't turn on the lights. I threw it into gear and navigated the logging trail by memory and moonlight. As we hit the paved road 5 miles away, I finally exhaled. We were out. I glanced at Eliza. She was clutching the flash drive in one hand and the crumpled letter in the other. She looked broken. Where are we going? She whispered. Safe house, I said. An old hunting cabin Ian and I built when we were kids. No one knows about it. Not even your father. She closed her eyes, tears leaking out. My father. He's going to look for me, Mason. He's going to pretend he's worried. Let him look, I said, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles popped. Because when we're ready, we're going to give him exactly what he wants. What? She asked, opening her eyes. A meeting, I said. We're going to set a trap, Eliza, and we're going to burn his whole kingdom down. The safe house wasn't much, a rusted A-frame cabin deep in the Black Ridge woods, invisible from the road and completely off the grid. But for now, it was a fortress. I got the old wood stove roaring, the dry cedar catching quickly, and handed Eliza a military MRE and a bottle of water. She sat on the dusty cot, wrapped in the foil emergency blanket, staring at the flames. She wasn't shivering from the cold anymore. She was shivering from the aftershocks of survival. I sat by the frosted window, cleaning the mud from my M40A5. The smell of gun oil filled the small room, mixing with the scent of burning wood. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, masking the silence that stretched between us. You have his eyes, she said suddenly, her voice cracking. She didn't look at me. She was still staring into the fire. I paused, sliding the bolt back into place with a metallic clack. I have his stubbornness, too. He should have called me Eliza. He shouldn't have tried to play hero alone against men like Grant. He wanted to protect you, she whispered, a tear tracing a line through the dirt on her cheek. He said you had seen enough war. He didn't want to bring his war to your doorstep. He thought he could handle it. He thought, because it was family business, he was safe. Well, the war is here now. I stood up, checking the perimeter through the cracks in the boarded-up window. Nothing but darkness. And family is the reason he's dead. I walked over to the small, scarred table where the silver flash drive sat. It looked so innocent, just a piece of plastic and metal, but people had died for it. We need to see what's on this. If it's just numbers, we need an accountant. If it's what I think it is, we need the cavalry. I plugged the drive into my encrypted field laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim cabin. A password prompt appeared. Enter key. Do you know it? I asked, looking at her. Eliza shook her head, frustration etching her face. He never told me passwords. He was paranoid about digital security. He said if he wrote it down, they could find it. I looked at the prompt. Beneath the text box was a hint. The day we truly started. Think, I urged gently. Not your wedding day. Not the day you met. What does that mean to you? Ian was sentimental, but he was precise. Eliza frowned, wiping her eyes. The day we found out about the baby? No, that was only 3 weeks ago. That's too new. She closed her eyes, searching her memories. Wait, the day he bought the farm. He said, this is it, Elle. This is where our legacy starts. It was June 15th. I typed in 0615. Access denied. 2 attempts remaining. Wrong, I muttered. Try again. Something deeper. Something only you two would know. A secret. The day he stood up to my father, she said softly, her voice hardening slightly. August 12th. It was the first time anyone ever told Victor no. My father wanted him to cook the books for a special shipment. Ian refused. He came home shaking but proud. He said, I'm my own man now, Eliza. That was the day he started keeping a separate journal. I typed 0812. Access granted. Files flooded the screen. Spreadsheets, audio recordings, scanned shipping manifests, bank transfer records. I clicked on a folder labeled evidence _ delete. It was worse than I thought. Sheriff Grant wasn't just taking bribes to look the other way. He was the logistics manager for a massive distribution network running through the county. Drugs, stolen weapons, even trafficking. And the supplier? The company moving all of it? Vance Trucking. I felt the air leave the room. Eliza saw my face. She stood up, the blanket falling from her shoulders, and walked to the screen. No, she whispered. Please, no. I opened an audio file dated 2 days before Ian's death. It was a recording of a phone call. The quality was crisp. Grant's voice. The new shipment is heavy. I need 2 extra drivers for the midnight run. Victor's voice. Use Ian. He's family. He won't talk. He knows what's good for him. Grant. He's asking questions. Victor. He found the discrepancies in the fuel logs. He knows about the routes. Victor. Then handle him. If he won't play ball, he's a liability. Family or not, business is business. Make it look like an accident. The recording ended with a sharp click. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Eliza let out a strangled sob, her hand covering her mouth, her knees buckling. I caught her before she hit the floor, guiding her back to the cot. He knew. She gasped, rocking back and forth. My father knew. He was at the funeral. He held my hand. He told me he was sorry. He's a monster, I said, my voice cold, fueled by a rage I hadn't felt since Kandahar. He sacrificed his own daughter's happiness for profit, and now we have the silver bullet to put him down for good. I went back to the laptop. I have a contact at the FBI, an old friend from my unit who joined the bureau. We send this to him directly. By sunrise, this mountain will be crawling with federal agents. Grant and your father won't see the sun set tomorrow. I moved the cursor to the send button on the encrypted email client. The screen flickered. Then it went black. What? I tapped the keys. Nothing. A message appeared in bright green text on the black screen. Remote access detected. Upload blocked. Geolocation initiated. My blood ran cold. It's a trap, I said, slamming the laptop shut instantly. The drive, it had a hidden partition, a dead man's switch, or a tracker. As soon as we accessed the files, it pinged a server. What does that mean? Eliza asked, panic rising in her voice, her eyes wide with fear. It means they know exactly where we are, I said, grabbing my gear bag and tossing her coat to her. We have to move. Right now. I kicked dirt over the fire in the stove, killing the light. Into the truck. Go. We ran out of the cabin into the freezing night. Just as my boots hit the mud, I heard it. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump of rotor blades cutting through the air. Chopper. I yelled. They weren't just sending deputies this time. Victor had money. He had called in private contractors. I threw Eliza into the passenger seat and vaulted into the driver's side. I gunned the engine, the tires spinning in the slush before catching traction. We tore down the narrow mountain trail, branches whipping against the windshield. But as we rounded the first sharp bend, blinding white LED floodlights hit us from the darkness. A black, armored SUV was blocking the path, sideways. I slammed on the brakes, the truck sliding sideways in the mud, stopping inches from the trees. For men in tactical gear, no badges, no uniforms, poured out of the SUV, assault rifles raised. Reverse. Eliza screamed, clutching the dashboard. I threw the truck into reverse, but the rear window exploded inward as a bullet tore through the cabin, missing my head by inches and embedding itself in the dashboard. We're pinned. I shouted. Get down. Stay on the floorboard and cover your head. I grabbed my rifle and kicked my door open, rolling out into the ditch just as the windshield shattered under a hail of gunfire. Suppressing fire, one of the men shouted. They were professionals. They were moving in a pincer formation. I took a breath, the world narrowing down to targets and angles. This wasn't a skirmish anymore. This was a war. And I was the only thing standing between Eliza and the men her father sent to kill her. We abandoned the truck in the ravine, letting the dense canopy hide the wreckage. We moved on foot through the freezing rain, deeper into the wilderness. I knew these woods better than I knew my own face. I'd hunted them with Ian since we were boys. But tonight, we were the prey. I led Eliza to a secondary hideout, an old moonshiner's cave Ian and I had found years ago. It was cold, damp, and smelled of wet limestone, but it was dry and, most importantly, it blocked thermal signatures. Rest, I ordered, handing her my canteen. We have 2 hours before dawn. Then we move. Eliza leaned against the rock wall, exhausted. Where can we go, Mason? They have the police. They have the roads. My father has money. We go on the offensive, I said, checking the magazine of my Glock. We can't upload the drive, but we can deliver it. Physically. To the FBI field office in the city. It's a 3-hour drive, but we can't take the highway. Mason, she said quietly. Before the laptop died, those files. My father. We'll deal with him, I said, my jaw tightening. Right now, he's just a target. I pulled out the hard copy of the journal Ian had hidden in the lockbox, the one Eliza had found with the drive. I hadn't had time to read it properly before. I flipped on my tactical light, shielding the beam with my hand. The entries were frantic. Ian had been terrified. August 20th, Victor offered me a bonus today. Said it was for loyalty. It was hush money. He knows I saw the crates. September 1st, Grant threatened Eliza today. Subtle, but I heard it. Nice family you have, Ian. Shame if this town got dangerous for them. Then I turned to the last entry. It was dated the day he died. September 15th, I'm going to the feds. Agent Miller. Meeting him at the diner at noon. But I have to be careful. Victor told me he has a man inside the bureau. Someone high up. My stomach dropped. A man inside. Eliza, I said slowly. This Agent Miller, did Ian ever meet him? I think so, she said, frowning. He mentioned a Miller once. Said he was the only one he could trust. No, I said, realizing the horror of it. Ian never made it to the diner. They got him on the road. I looked at the journal again. There was a loose photo tucked in the back. It was a picture of Victor at a charity gala, shaking hands with a man in a suit. Ian had circled the man's face in red ink. I recognized him. It wasn't an FBI agent. It was State Senator Corwin. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a local corruption ring. Victor wasn't just working with a dirty sheriff. He was laundering money for a politician. That's why the FBI link on the drive was a trap. The friend Ian thought he had wasn't real. Twist. The agent Miller Ian was communicating with wasn't an agent. It was Grant, catfishing him to find out what he knew. Eliza, I said, my voice grim. We can't go to the FBI office. Not the local one. Victor owns them too. Senator Corwin is involved. The senator? Eliza looked sick. He gave the eulogy at Ian's funeral. He gave the order. I corrected. We are completely alone. So what do we do? She whispered, tears streaming down her face again. If we can't go to the police, and we can't go to the feds, we stop running, I said, standing up. The plan formed in my mind, brutal and final. We use the only thing they care about against them. The money. No, I said. Their egos. We're going to invite them to a meeting. All of them. Victor, Grant, even the senator if we can get him. We tell them we surrender. We tell them we'll trade the drive for safe passage. They'll kill us, she said, terrified. They'll try, I said, pulling a detonator from my pack. But they won't be meeting a grieving widow and a scared brother. They'll be walking into a kill box. I looked at her. Can you do this? I need you to be the voice. You have to call your father. You have to sound broken. You have to beg him. Eliza wiped her face. Her expression changed. The fear didn't leave, but something harder replaced it. Hate. Give me the phone, she said. Eliza held the satellite phone like it was a grenade, her thumb hovering over the call button. Her hand trembled, but her eyes were dry. The transformation was happening. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was becoming a player in the game. Remember, I instructed, checking the charges on my Claymore mines. You are terrified. You are done running. You just want to save the baby. Feed his ego. Victor needs to feel like he's winning. She nodded, took a deep breath, and dialed. I put the phone on speaker, keeping the volume low. Ring. Ring. Eliza? Victor's voice came through, smooth, concerned, and utterly fake. My God, honey, where are you? The police said, Stop it, Dad. Eliza cut him off, her voice breaking perfectly. Just stop. I know. Ian told me everything in the letter. I know about the trucks. I know about Grant. There was a silence on the line. A long, cold pause. When Victor spoke again, the fatherly warmth was gone. His voice was ice. You're confused, sweetheart. Grief makes people imagine things. I have the drive, Dad, she screamed, a hysterical edge to her voice that wasn't entirely acting. I have the files. I saw the payments to the senator. I saw the order to kill Ian. Where are you? Victor demanded sharply. I'm tired, she sobbed. I can't run anymore. I'm cold. I just want my baby to be safe. I don't care about the money. I don't care about justice. I just want to live. Smart girl, Victor said, his tone relaxing slightly. You bring me that drive, and this all goes away. I promise. We're family. I'll protect you. I don't trust you, she whispered. I want Grant there. And I want to see the senator. I need to know I have immunity. Real immunity. That's complicated, Eliza. Then I burn the drive, she shrieked. I'll throw it in the river. And then you have nothing but a loose end. Okay, Victor soothed. Easy. We can do that. Where? The old mill, she said, looking at me. I nodded. Where Ian proposed. It's quiet. Noon. Just us. Done, Victor said. See you soon, sweetheart. The line went dead. Eliza dropped the phone and slumped against the cave wall, shaking violently. Did he buy it? He thinks he's won, I said, packing my gear. He thinks he's dealing with a scared girl. He has no idea he's walking into a slaughterhouse. We moved out at first light. The old mill was an abandoned lumber facility about 4 miles down the river. It was a tactical nightmare for an attacker, but a dream for a defender. High catwalks, plenty of cover, and only one road in. We arrived by 0800 hours. I spent the next 3 hours turning the mill into a fortress. I placed tripwires at the main entrance, rigged to flash bangs, not explosives. I needed them disoriented, not dead instantly. I needed confessions on tape. I set up remote cameras in the rafters, linking them to a cloud server that would upload the footage in real time. This time, I wasn't relying on a single connection. "You stand there," I told Eliza, pointing to a spot in the center of the main floor, bathed in a shaft of sunlight coming through the broken roof. "It's the only clear spot. It forces them to come into the open." "Where will you be?" she asked, looking up at the dark, rusting machinery above. "Everywhere," I said. "But mostly, I'll be watching through a scope. When they arrive, you talk. You get them to admit it. Get them to say Ian's name. Once they do, drop to the ground. And then I rain hell." I climbed up to the catwalks, settling into a nest of old sawdust and shadows. I checked my rifle. I checked my sidearm. I checked my knife. At 11:55 a.m., the sound of engines drifted up the valley. 3 black SUVs rolled up the dirt road, kicking up dust. They parked in a fan formation, blocking the exit. Doors opened. Grant stepped out first, wearing his uniform, hand on his gun. Then Victor, in a long wool coat, looking like he was attending a board meeting. And finally, a man I hadn't expected to actually show up, Senator Corwin. He looked annoyed, checking his watch, flanked by 2 massive bodyguards. "Eliza," Victor called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous mill. "We're here. Come out." Eliza stepped into the light. She looked small, alone, and defenseless. She held the drive up in her hand. "I'm here, Dad," she said, her voice steady. "Good," Victor smiled, walking forward. "Bring it here. Let's go home." "Not yet," she said. "I want to hear it. I want you to say it." "Say what?" Victor sighed, impatient. "That you killed him," she said. "That you killed Ian because he wouldn't help you smuggle drugs for him." She pointed at the senator. "Girl, you are testing my patience," Grant growled, stepping forward. "Let her have her moment," the senator said, his voice smooth and bored. "Yes, Eliza. Your husband was a boy playing a man's game. He was an obstacle. We removed him. It's just business. Now, give us the drive, or you join him." "Gotcha." I watched the recording light on my monitor blink. Upload complete. Now, it was time for the kinetic portion of the negotiation. "Get on the ground," I whispered into my comms. Eliza dropped flat. Grant reacted first, confused. "What the?" I exhaled. Crack. Eliza hit the concrete floor the second I gave the command. High in the rafters, I was already exhaling. My heart rate slowed to a steady rhythm. I wasn't aiming for a headshot. Not yet. A dead man can't testify, but a terrified one will sing. I squeezed the trigger. Thwip. The bullet slammed into the engine block of Grant's SUV. The hood buckled, steam hissing violently as the radiator exploded. It wasn't a kill shot. It was a statement. "You are not leaving." "Sniper!" Grant screamed, diving behind the open door of his vehicle. "High ground. Take cover." Victor scrambled backward, losing his composure entirely. He fell onto the dusty floor, crawling behind a stack of rotting lumber. The senator, for all his arrogance, froze. His bodyguards didn't. They tackled him, dragging him behind a concrete pillar. "Hold your fire." I boomed through the mill's PA system. I had hot-wired the old speakers an hour ago. My voice echoed like the voice of God from the rusting ceiling. "Drop your weapons, or the next one goes through a kneecap." "Who is that?" Victor yelled, his voice shrill with panic. "Eliza." "Who is that?" Eliza stayed flat on the ground, hands over her head, exactly as I instructed. She was the bait, and now she was in the safest spot in the room, the dead zone I had cleared of angles. "It's the ghost of the man you murdered, Victor," I shouted back. "Now toss the guns. Center of the floor. You have 5 seconds." Grant wasn't listening. He was a predator, and predators don't surrender. He popped up from behind the door, firing blindly into the rafters with his service weapon. Bad move. I shifted my aim. I didn't shoot him. I shot the hydraulic line of the log crane hanging directly above his SUV. Snap! The cable sheared. The massive steel claw plummeted down, crashing onto the roof of Grant's cruiser with the force of a meteor. The car collapsed inward, glass shattering everywhere. Grant was thrown back by the concussion, dazed but alive. That was a warning, Sheriff. I yelled. Do you want the next one between your eyes? Silence fell over the mill. The dust settled. We can make a deal. Senator Corwin shouted from behind his pillar. Whoever you are, name your price. I can get you money. I can get you a pardon. I don't want your money, Senator. I replied, my voice cold. I want the truth. And I want it loud enough for the microphones. What microphones? Victor gasped. The ones broadcasting this live to the federal server your son-in-law set up. I lied. It wasn't live, but the recording was secure. Every word you say is going to a grand jury. So let's start with the confession. Who ordered the hit on Ian Vance? It was him. Victor screamed immediately, pointing a shaking finger toward the senator's pillar. Corwin. He said Ian was a liability. He told Grant to handle it. You lying snake. Corwin roared. It was your operation. You begged me to cover up the transport logs. I have the ledger. Victor yelled back, desperate to save his own skin. I kept a copy. It has Corwin's signature on the shell companies. Gotcha. They were eating each other. Eliza looked up, her face streaked with dust and tears. She heard it. She heard her father sell out everyone to save himself. That's enough. Grant suddenly roared. He wasn't breaking. He was escalating. He pulled a radio from his belt. Team 2. Breach. Breach now. Kill them all. Team 2. My blood ran cold. I scanned the perimeter. I had accounted for the 3 SUVs. I hadn't accounted for a backup team. Suddenly, the heavy steel doors at the back of the mill, the ones I had welded shut, blew inward with a deafening explosion. 4 men in full tactical gear stormed in, moving with military precision. They weren't deputies. They were mercenaries. And they were flanking my position. Eliza, run. I screamed, abandoning the PA system. Get to the basement hatch. Go. I opened fire. No warnings this time. I dropped the lead mercenary with a chest shot, but his body armor absorbed it. He staggered, but kept coming, spraying automatic fire into the rafters. Bullets sparked off the steel walkway inches from my face. I rolled, returning fire, aiming for the unarmored gaps, neck, thighs, pelvis. I hit one in the leg. He went down, but the others were suppressing me, pinning me down. Get the girl. Grant yelled, scrambling toward Eliza. No. I warred. I pulled the pin on a smoke grenade and dropped it to the floor below. Thick white smoke billowed out instantly, blinding everyone on the ground. Mason. Eliza screamed from somewhere in the haze. I'm coming. I yelled. I didn't climb down. I jumped. I hooked my rappelling line to the railing and vaulted over the edge, diving straight into the smoke and the chaos below. The negotiations were over. Now we fight. I free fell through the smoke, the air rushing past my ears like a freight train. It was a 20-foot drop from the catwalk to the mill floor. I didn't aim for a superhero landing. I aimed for the pile of sawdust near the main saw blade. I hit the ground hard, rolling instantly to disperse the impact. My shoulder screamed in protest, an old injury from Afghanistan flaring up, but the adrenaline drowned it out. I came up in a crouch, my M40A5 slung across my back, the suppressed Glock 19 in my hand. The mill floor was a chaotic hellscape of white smoke, flashing muzzle blasts, and the deafening roar of gunfire. The mercenary team, Team 2, was moving with disciplined aggression. They weren't panicking like Victor or Grant. They were sweeping the room, their laser sights cutting through the haze like red vipers. Target is on the floor, one of them shouted, his voice distorted by a gas mask. Suppress and clear. Watch the rafters. They thought I was still up there. Good. I stayed low, crawling beneath the massive conveyor belts that used to feed logs into the buzz saws. The air was thick with the acrid smell of chemical smoke and ozone. I could hear Eliza coughing somewhere to my left. near the heavy machinery. She hadn't made it to the hatch yet. "Eliza," I whispered into my comms, praying the earpiece she wore was still working. "Stay down. Don't move until I say." "Mason," she gasped, her voice trembling. "They're close. I can see their boots." I checked my angles. There were 4 mercenaries. One was down, clutching his leg near the entrance. 3 were active. 2 were suppressing the catwalks I had just jumped from, wasting ammo on shadows. The third, the leader, by the looks of his movement, was advancing on Eliza's position, sweeping his rifle methodically. He was 20 feet from her. I was 30 feet from him. I didn't have a clean shot. A stack of rusted oil drums blocked my line of sight. I had to close the gap. I holstered the Glock and pulled my combat knife, a K-bar with a matte black blade. Gunfire draws attention. Silence spreads fear. I moved like a ghost, stepping in time with the bursts of their gunfire to mask my sound. I flanked around the oil drums, coming up behind the mercenary leader. He was big, armored, and focused on the space where Eliza was hiding. He raised his hand to signal his team. "I have eyes on the female." Moving to secure. He took a step forward. I lunged. I didn't go for a movie-style throat slit. That's messy and loud. I slammed the hilt of the knife into the base of his skull, right where the helmet met the neck guard. He crumpled without a sound, his knees buckling instantly. I caught him before he hit the floor, dragging him behind the drums. I stripped him of his radio and a flashbang grenade. "Leader down," I whispered to myself. I keyed his radio. "Clear on the female," I said, mimicking his gruff tone as best I could. Moving to extract. The other 2 mercenaries stopped firing. "Copy that, lead. We're holding the perimeter. Watch the sniper." They bought it. For now. I crawled over to Eliza. She was curled into a tight ball behind a massive generator, her hands over her ears. When she saw me, she almost screamed, but I clamped a hand over her mouth. "It's me," I whispered, my face inches from hers. I was covered in sawdust and sweat. "We're leaving, but we have to go through them." "My father," she choked out, pointing toward the center of the room. The smoke was starting to clear. In the center of the mill, near the wreckage of the crushed SUV, a strange tableau had formed. Grant was on his knees, dazed, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. Senator Corwin was crouching behind him, using the sheriff as a human shield. And Victor was standing up. He was holding a gun, Grant's backup piece. And he wasn't pointing it at me. He was pointing it at Eliza. "Come out," Victor screamed, his voice cracking. He looked insane, his expensive coat ruined, his eyes wild. "I know you're there. Mason, whatever your name is. Come out or she dies." He didn't know exactly where we were, but he was sweeping the gun back and forth across our general area. "He's going to shoot," Eliza whispered, horrified. "He's actually going to shoot me." "He's desperate," I said. "A desperate man makes mistakes." I looked at the 2 remaining mercenaries. They were confused. Their boss was screaming, their leader was silent, and the smoke was lifting. They were starting to realize something was wrong. "Check in, lead," one of them radioed. "Status." I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled the pin on the flashbang I had taken. "Eliza," I said, "when this goes off, you run for the basement hatch. It's 10 feet behind us. Do not stop. Do not look back." "What about you?" "I'm going to have a chat with your father." I hurled the flashbang over the generator. It arced through the air, landing with a metallic clink right between the 2 mercenaries. Bang! The blinding white light washed out the entire room. The sound was a physical punch to the gut. "Go!" I shoved Eliza. She scrambled up and bolted for the hatch. I broke cover, but not to run. I surged forward, raising the Glock. The 2 mercenaries were staggering, blinded. I double-tapped the one on the left, 2 shots to the chest plate, 1 to the pelvis. He went down hard. The second one was tougher. He was firing blindly, spraying bullets in a wide arc. 1 round clipped my shoulder, tearing through the tactical vest and grazing the skin. It burned like a hot iron, but I didn't stop. I closed the distance, grabbed the barrel of his rifle, and drove my knee into his gut. He doubled over. I pistol whipped him across the jaw, sending him sprawling into the sawdust. Now, it was just the politicians. I turned toward the center of the room. Victor was blinking, trying to clear the spots from his eyes. He saw Eliza running. He raised the gun. "No," he screamed. He pulled the trigger. Click. He stared at the gun. He pulled it again. Click. I walked out of the smoke, my weapon lowered. "Grant carries a revolver. Victor," I said, my voice calm, echoing in the sudden silence. 6 shots. He fired all of them at the rafters before the crane dropped. Victor looked at me, then at the empty gun. His face crumbled. The mask of the powerful CEO fell away, leaving a pathetic, frightened old man. Grant was trying to crawl away, clutching his ribs. The senator was nowhere to be seen. He had likely scurried into the shadows like the rat he was. I walked up to Victor. He backed away until he hit the crushed SUV. "Please," he whimpered, raising his hands. "I can pay you. I have millions in offshore accounts. Just let me go. I'm her father. You stopped being her father the day you sold her husband for a trucking contract," I said. I didn't shoot him. I didn't have to. From the main entrance, sirens began to wail. Not the local police sirens. These were different. Sharp, piercing, federal sirens. "You hear that?" I asked him. "That's the cavalry. But they aren't coming for me." Victor's eyes widened. "You said the upload failed." "I lied," I said. Suddenly, a shot rang out. It didn't come from me. It didn't come from the mercenaries. It came from the shadows near the back wall. Victor jerked. A red bloom appeared on his chest. He looked down, confused, then collapsed into the dust. I spun around, raising my weapon. Senator Corwin stepped out of the shadows, holding a small, silver pocket pistol. He looked calm, adjusting his tie. He had just murdered his co-conspirator. He was resisting. Corwin said smoothly, holstering the gun. "I feared for my life. I'm a hero, really. I stopped the cartel boss." He looked at me, a cold smile playing on his lips. "And you? You're just a crazed gunman who kidnapped a pregnant woman. Who do you think they'll believe? A United States senator? Or a drifter with a sniper rifle?" He was right. He was going to spin this. He was going to kill me, claim self-defense, and walk away with a medal. "Drop the gun, son," Corwin commanded, picking up Victor's fallen weapon to plant on me later. "It's over." I looked at him. Then I looked up at the rafters, at the small red light blinking on the camera mount he hadn't noticed. "You're right, Senator," I said, lowering my Glock. "It is over." "Good choice," Corwin sneered, raising his pistol to my head. Boom. The shot didn't come from his gun. It came from the basement hatch. Corwin's gun hand exploded in a spray of blood and bone. He screamed, dropping the weapon, clutching his mangled wrist. I looked over. Eliza was standing halfway out of the hatch. She was holding Grant's backup piece, the one Victor had dropped. She was shaking, but the gun was steady. She hadn't run. She had come back. "Get away from him," she said, her voice low and dangerous. Corwin fell to his knees, wailing. "She shot me. She's crazy." I walked over to Corwin and kicked him in the chest, knocking him flat. I put my boot on his throat. "She's not crazy," I said, leaning down. "She's a Marine's wife." The mill doors burst open. Blue jackets with yellow letters swarmed in. FBI. Federal agents. "Drop the weapons." Dozens of laser sights painted my chest. I slowly raised my hands, a grim smile on my face. "Took you long enough." Eliza climbed fully out of the hatch. She didn't look at the agents. She walked straight to me, ignoring the guns pointed at us. She stood beside me, shoulder to shoulder. "We surrender," she said. As the agents moved in to cuff us, I looked at Corwin, writhing on the ground, and Grant, moaning by the car. The recording light in the rafters finally turned green. Upload verified. The war was over. But the battle for the truth had just begun. The mill was swarming with FBI agents. Paramedics were tending to Grant, who was handcuffed to a stretcher, weeping like a child. Senator Corwin was screaming about his rights, his hand wrapped in thick bandages, as he was shoved into the back of a federal transport van. I sat on the back of an ambulance, a blanket draped over my shoulders, a medic cleaning the graze on my arm. Eliza sat next to me. She was quiet, watching the flashing blue lights bounce off the rusted steel walls of the mill. "It's over," she whispered, almost to herself. "Not quite," I said, looking at the agent approaching us. It was Special Agent Miller, the real Agent Miller. He was an older man, sharp eyes, no-nonsense demeanor. He looked at me, then at Eliza. "You two made a hell of a mess," Miller said, though there was no anger in his voice. "But you handed us a network we've been chasing for 5 years. Corwin was the ghost we couldn't catch." "He got sloppy," I said. "He got arrogant," Miller corrected. "He looked at the body of Victor Vance being zipped into a bag. And he got betrayed. By the way, we checked the drive. The encryption, it wasn't standard." I looked at Eliza. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the flash drive. But then she reached into her other pocket and pulled out something else. A small, battered SD card. "The drive was a decoy," Eliza said softly. "I remembered in the cave. Ian told me once, if I ever give you something shiny, look for the dull thing next to it." Twist. The flash drive contained only the financial records, enough to indict, but not enough to bury them. The SD card, hidden inside her wedding ring box which she had carried the whole time, contained the video recordings Ian had made of every meeting. "He recorded them?" Miller asked, his eyebrows shooting up. "Every single word," Eliza said, handing him the card. "Grant, my father, the senator. Discussing the shipments. Discussing the murders. It's all there." Miller took the card like it was a holy relic. This puts them away for life. No deals. No parole." He looked at me. "Technically, you're a vigilante, Mason. I should arrest you for assault, reckless endangerment, and discharging a firearm in a federal investigation." He paused, looking at the chaos around us. "But," he continued, closing his notebook, "my report says you were acting as a confidential informant under duress, and that the suspects engaged you first." He extended his hand. "Get out of here, before I change my mind." I shook his hand. "Thank you, sir." Chapter 11. Justice and Legacy. 6 months later. The cemetery was different in the spring. The mud was gone, replaced by soft green grass. The oak trees were full of leaves, casting gentle shadows over the graves. I stood by Ian's headstone. It was clean now, polished granite. Ian Vance. Beloved husband. Father. Hero. I wasn't wearing my tactical gear. I was wearing a suit, Ian's old suit, actually. It fit a little tight in the shoulders, but Eliza insisted. "He would have laughed seeing you in a tie," a voice said behind me. I turned. Eliza was walking up the path. She looked different. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by a quiet strength. And she wasn't alone. She was pushing a stroller. I walked over and looked inside. The baby was asleep, a tiny fist curled against his cheek. He had Ian's nose. "Meet your uncle, little guy," Eliza whispered, touching the baby's cheek. "What's his name?" I asked, though I had a feeling I knew. "Ian," she said, smiling. "Ian Mason Vance." I felt a lump in my throat I couldn't swallow. That's a lot of name to live up to." "He has a good teacher," she said, looking at me. "You're staying, right? You're not disappearing into the woods again." I looked at the grave, then at the baby, and finally at the town below. The corruption was gone. The sheriff was in federal prison. The senator was awaiting trial. The town was healing. But monsters always come back. And someone had to be there to watch the shadows. "I'm staying," I said. "Someone has to teach him how to shoot a jump shot." Ian was terrible at basketball. Eliza laughed, a genuine, happy sound that drifted on the wind. I put my hand on the stroller. For the first time in years, the war inside my head was quiet. The mission was complete. Wow, what a journey. From the rain-soaked cemetery to that final moment of peace, this story was a ride of pure emotion and justice. I want to take a moment to ask you something personal. Where in the world are you watching this from right now? It is amazing to think that this story is connecting us all, from bustling cities to quiet towns, across oceans and borders. Let me know your city or country in the comments below. I love reading every single one of them. And here is my question for you. If you were in Eliza's shoes, could you have forgiven your father, or would you have done exactly what she did? It's a tough one. Let's discuss it in the comments. If this story made your heart race, please gently tap that like button. It helps us bring more of these epic tales to you. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications. I am already writing the next thriller, a story of a Navy SEAL K-9 unit and a betrayal that will leave you speechless. You do not want to miss it. Until then, stay safe, stay strong, and keep watching.